Charles. And Vanessa, let's bring you onto the program. And of course, in the meantime, over the last couple of days, we've seen Israel expanding the conflict in the Middle East, and other countries beginning to be targeted in order to achieve Israel's objectives.
Yeah, well, in the last 24 hours, actually, but yes, beginning with the direct confrontation with Yemen, which we talked about last week. So this is a photograph of an area called Majd al-Shams, which is actually a town or village that is divided between Syrian territory and illegally occupied Israeli territory, the occupied Golan territories, which were illegally annexed in 1967 and are recognized by the UNGA as being illegally annexed. And there, a couple of days ago, there was an attack or there was an incident in a playground in Majd al-Shams, which killed 12 children and youth members of the local Druze community. And basically what happened is, if we just have a quick look at the context inside that article, basically there were, as I said, 12 children in the town in the occupied Syrian Golan Heights on July the 27th, put Hezbollah and Israel on the brink of a wider confrontation once again. After the attack, Israel announced that the explosion that killed the 12 children was caused by an Iranian-made rocket fired by Hezbollah. The Lebanese group denied vociferously the accusation and said the explosion was caused by an Israeli Iron Dome round that malfunctioned, which is the far more likely incident, because there would be no point in Hezbollah targeting what is effectively a Syrian town occupied by the Israelis. And in fact, when various Israeli officials tried to attend the funerals in Majd al-Shams, they were booed and told to leave in no uncertain terms. And this is just a short video of Netanyahu's reception when he tried to attend the funeral ceremony in Majd al-Shams. So not exactly a warm reception for the Israeli administration officials. Interesting that the Biden administration is now claiming that the Golan Heights is part of northern Israel. Now, where does that come from? 2019, so that was the Trump administration, which, if people remember, Trump recognized the occupied Golan territories as being Israeli, and in fact, Netanyahu promised to name an area of the territory after Trump, calling it Trump Heights. That then was led on to ministers within the Israeli regime authorizing Netanyahu and Gallant to order retaliation for the deadly Golan strike, which of course was still being blamed on Hezbollah despite there being no evidence to that effect. Netanyahu broke away from his meeting in the US to return to Israel. And then basically what happened at 9 p.m. last night, there was a blast or a targeting, an assassination in the southern area of Beirut, which of course was targeted a few months ago, killing a Hezbollah commander, a Hamas commander in a similar area. But this blast was actually in a heavily populated residential area and directly behind one of the biggest hospitals in the area. So I just put together some of the video that was taken of the targeting.
إيه يلا البسي البسي. في عالم، في حدا على الأرض هناك؟ ما حدا نزل.
There were, in fact, 80 injuries, 3 deaths, 1 woman and 2 children. This was the scene later on that night of the completely destroyed building. Israel is claiming that the targeting was of basically number 2 commander in Hezbollah, Fouad Shukr. And they're claiming that they eliminated him. However, there has been no official statement from Hezbollah. It is believed that he was found alive in the rubble, badly injured and taken to hospital. So everyone is still waiting for an official announcement from Hezbollah. And until that moment, we can't acknowledge that he was assassinated. The children that were killed, Hassan and Amira Fadlallah, 10 and 6 years old, and a young woman, Basila Beydoun, also killed in that attack. All 3, obviously, civilians. The reaction immediately from particularly foreign officials, this is David Lammy, telling UK citizens to leave Lebanon immediately and not to travel to northern Israel. At almost the same time, I'm not sure of the exact time, but the US carried out a strike in Iraq against the Kataib Hezbollah and the PMU base south of Baghdad, assassinating those that they claimed had been responsible for drone attacks on the illegal US occupation bases in Syria in particular, but also in Iraq. And then at about 2 a.m., the leader of Hamas, Ismail Haniyeh, was assassinated in Tehran by an Israeli airstrike, which we believe came from outside Iran. So it came from a third country's territory. That hasn't been revealed as to which country it was yet. Haniyeh was basically in Tehran to attend the inauguration of President Pezeshkian. So effectively, Israel, while negotiating with Hamas, has just eliminated the chief negotiator. So now what has happened, Israeli airspace is closed from Hadara to Haifa line northward, state-run broadcasting authority. Deputy head of Russian Foreign Ministry calls the killing of Hamas Politburo chief unacceptable political murder that will escalate regional tensions. In the first statement on Israel's strike in Beirut's southern suburbs, Hezbollah confirms, as I said, that Shukr was in the building hit by Israeli airstrike, but his fate is still unknown. Iran has vowed revenge and retaliation for Haniyeh's assassination, inevitably because he was a guest in Iran when he was killed and his bodyguard was killed with him. There are reports that the US is shifting its assault ship to the Mediterranean to deter an escalation of the Israel-Lebanon conflict. The amphibious assault ship USS Wasp entered the eastern Mediterranean this week as the US positions warships to try to keep fighting between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon from escalating into a wider war. And allegedly, those boats are there to evacuate civilians if necessary. But I'm sure people can imagine what else they may be there for. So I think we're facing really an inevitable expansion of the war.
Yeah, I think they're there to escalate the war, not to prevent escalation of the war. But we can talk about that a little bit more. Now, Vanessa, let's bring you back on screen here and back to international affairs and Israel.
Yes, another example of the absolute moral depravity of the Zionist regime, entity, and the forces. So people may have seen that there have been riots. In fact, there's potentially been the start of a civil war in Israel itself. Not quite for the reasons that people might expect. So Israeli soldiers, this was in Haaretz, suspected of raping Palestinian prisoner arrested, sparking far-right riot. minister among Israelis that were rioting, not in favor of stopping this appalling, basically anal rape of detainees with blunt objects, but in favor of defending the military, the 9 Israeli soldiers in the Stay Taman detention center, claiming that they were raping a Palestinian detainee in self-defense because they felt threatened by that detainee. Israeli military police raided Stay Taman, but were met with resistance by soldiers who reportedly barricaded themselves into the facility and used pepper spray to defend themselves before eventually being taken into custody. They were suspected of abusing a Palestinian detainee who, according to Arab 48, is suffering from a serious wound in his rectum area. This is not an isolated incident, according to multiple testimonies from former detainees. And so then this was put out by Afshin Ratansi of Going Underground. Israel is descending into civil war on the right of Israeli soldiers to rape Palestinians. The moderate wing rape is wrong and commit genocide by bombing, shooting, and ethnically cleansing them instead. The extreme wing, which is the majority of the current administration, and actually the majority of Israelis, according to many analysts, Israeli soldiers should be allowed to rape Palestinians. Another headline in Israeli media bordering on anarchy, IDF chief sounds alarm after right-wing mob overruns a second base, also apparently accused of carrying out the same appalling torture. And then I just wanted to show this. This is a video of 2 Knesset members arguing with each other in the Knesset over whether rectal rape should be allowed or not. So let's just roll this.
פעמים שם שכנראה בגלל איזה שהם טענות של יחס למחבלי נוח'בה, ויש שם אירוע של התבצרות וכולי. הטרלול שהמדינה שלנו נכנסת אליו סביב הסיפור הזה הוא מטורף וצריך להפסיק אותו, ואני חושב שצריך פה לתת דוגמה אישית, ואני אומר עכשיו, ואני קורא לחברי הקואליציה לעשות כמוני, אני קם ואני יוצא מפה, ואני לא הולך להצביע יותר על שום דבר, עד שהסיפור הזה והטרלול הזה, שיש מי שבפרקליטות חושב שאפשר לבוא ולעצור חיילים על דברים שעושים למחבלי נוח'בה, לא נגמר. אוקיי? ואני מאוד מבקש, ואני חושב שחבריי בקואליציה טוב יעשו, אם יעשו כמוני. אנחנו לא יכולים להמשיך כרגיל.
להכניס מקל לרקטום של בן אדם, זה לגיטימי?
כן, אם הוא נוח'בה, הכל לגיטימי לעשות לו. הכל. הכל.
זה מה שרציתי.
הכל, האנשים האלה, אתה יודע מה עשו?
אוקיי.
טוב.
יש דברים שלא עושים.
Not quite sure how I follow up after that. But then let's have a look at US State Department spokesperson Vedant Patel try to argue or justify the same crime.
Israeli police detained soldiers yesterday, or the day before yesterday, suspected of raping a Palestinian, sparking protests and so on. Apparently, rape and killing and torture and all this thing, it happens regularly in Israeli detention camps. Does that constitute a war crime to you?
So the reports of abuse are deeply concerning, and we have been clear and consistent with Israel and the IDF that they need to treat all detainees humanely and with dignity in accordance with humanitarian law. We also, I spoke a little bit about this earlier in the week side, we reiterate the support that that the IDF is investigating some of these allegations of serious abuse of Palestinian detainees, and that is news that we welcome, and we're going to let that process, and we believe in due process, and we're going to let that process play out.
2 quick points. Now, if proven to be true, that does constitute a war crime, doesn't it?
I'm not a legal expert, Saeed. It certainly, I imagine it would be inconsistent with Israeli law. And so, of course, that is why we have been clear that the treatment of any detainee needs to be consistent with international humanitarian law.
Also quite extraordinary. But I suppose they have Guantanamo to fall back on. But now let's finally just have a little clip of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. arguing the morality of the Zionist armed forces.
So they've achieved they protected in the most challenging conditions. The Israeli government the IDF has protected civilians better than any army in history. John Spencer said it has done more to protect civilians under more difficult circumstances than any army in history.
I mean, I have actually written extensively at my Substack about Israel's culture of rape and child abuse, and that includes offering refuge to multiple accused and prosecuted pedophiles, particularly from the United States, that are given access to Israel without any issue whatsoever. The rape of their own refugees, particularly settlers from the north that have come into temporary accommodation in the south of the occupied territories. It is a systemic issue within the Israeli armed forces, both rape and sexual harassment, and rape of boys, girls, and adults within the detention system there in the occupied territories. Quite extraordinary what we're watching at the moment.
Absolutely, and absolutely extraordinary that there's even an argument about it. But